If you've watched my stuff for a while, you know that I've never been a Cars hater. It's not my favorite movie of all time or anything, by a long shot, but I found the first one pleasantly passable, most likely due to childhood car trips driving through vistas that looked exactly like this. And yeah, Cars 2 wasn't the worst because it wasn't this. But in essence, I do agree that while they may not be the most disappointing of Pixar's films, because seriously, how good did you expect movies called Cars to be? But they are the weaker of Pixar's films, with the least interesting stories and the least interesting characters. And it did not mean that I was looking forward to a third one more than anyone else. But this time, something weird happened. Pixar suddenly dropped a super dramatic teaser of lightning supposedly getting into a crash, and suddenly everybody cared about Cars 3 for about 5 hot seconds before the longer trailer dropped and we saw that he was fine. I guess there might have been some ambiguity as to when in the movie the crash might have happened, but since Pixar is not one of those studios known for, how should we put it, blatant spoilerific trailers, it was pretty safe that if they were going to reveal this, it would happen at the start. And yeah, sorry to ruin it for you guys, but no, the crash happens at the start, and no, lightning does not die. In fact, 5 minutes after the crash happens, everyone kind of forgets it happens, because the story isn't about lightning getting over an injury, like, certain movie reviewers who recently shattered their ankle in a car crash and didn't post anything for 2 months. It's about how even before the crash, lightning is getting outrun by new, technologically advanced rookie racers, and about whether it's time for him to retire.
Old men feeling irrelevant in rise of new generation or technology?
Isn't that default demographic pandering premise number 5 between the Chosen One and the supernatural threesome? But seriously, the only thing missing is that Lightning doesn't have a teenage daughter for one of the younger guys to date to make him feel like the younger generation is literally taking everything from him. So yes, again, the Cars franchise gives us a very familiar story, cementing that Pixar just really doesn't seem to try as hard with these movies. But then again, Cars. I really do think that these movies just existed for the guys in the studio to just play around with and have something that has a little bit less pressure than the usual stuff they work on. That said, it is still a Pixar movie, and Cars 3 is still a pretty good movie. Not great, but good. In fact, it's more than likely the best of all the Cars movies, because Lightning is at the most sympathetic and likable he's ever been, which tends to happen with what is now an underdog story. And I know I give movies a lot of crap for being predictable and formulaic, and this is. It just so happens that Pixar is also really good at filmmaking, and framing, and animation, and character, and timeless, natural-sounding, non-obnoxious dialogue, and getting us to care about characters, which is more than can be said for others. And this movie, even more than other Pixar movies, is about feelings, and characters talking about feelings. And I like movies that talk about feelings, but I have to admit, being pretty light on comedy and mostly focused on the problems of an aging racer talking about how irritated he is by technology and young people, there is almost nothing for kids here. They must be so bored, and according to a lot of reviewers, a lot of kids were. I mean, I personally don't really care about it not being funny. I got my silliness quota from Captain Underpants, and I'll likely get it again from another sequel coming up that nobody asked for. It's just so weird to have this super serious, depressingly toned film out of Cars, the movie franchise that basically exists to sell merchandise to children. You almost wonder if maybe they made this film to save the negative reputation of the Cars franchise, and as this movie is basically a follow-up to the first one, it basically kind of ignores that the second movie ever happened, which I'm sure people will be happy to do. But this is really what you thought the best use of your time was, as opposed to just doing anything else? And yeah, about that follow-up, it's kind of hard at first to get on board with this whole aging racer angle when Lightning looks exactly the same as he did in the first movie when he was a rookie. And even though this is a good version of this familiar story, there's still some things they could have done to make it better. Like, the big hook in this movie is that Lightning finds himself in the same position as Doc Hudson in the first film. In fact, arguably, this entire movie is basically one giant love letter to Doc Hudson's character. And that is easily the most touching, wonderful part about the film, and I love it. It's just kind of odd. Like, we need to pay tribute to the greatest Pixar character of all time. I mean, I know he was played by Paul Newman, but it wasn't his greatest character either. But as a symbolic tribute to mentors and role models in general, yeah, it was actually pretty moving. Wait, we were talking about bad things. But what really would have brought this full circle is if at any point, Lightning would have realized that his new young rival Jackson Storm is the same arrogant, disrespectful tool that he was in the first movie, when he was a rookie, bringing together the angle that this generation war doesn't really mention that often. You know, that for as much hate that always get hurls at young people for ruining everything, the older generation at one point were themselves the young people ruining everything for another older generation. What? Talking pictures? But all those rich silent actors will lose their jobs! Curse those young people for wanting to hear human voices! But no, Lightning never does realize this. He does do the next best thing in developing his bond with Cruz, his young trainer, and that is genuinely the best part of the movie, and they do provide a decent dialogue between the generations, but still, Jackson Storm stays the one-dimensional jerkwad he was presented as in the trailer, and I think that was a real missed opportunity. And then Nathan Fillion's character, who would usually be the bad guy in these kind of situations, but initially is just presented as a well-meaning pragmatist. But then in the third act, he has to be turned into some sort of bad guy, because I guess you can't know if what you're doing is right unless someone tells you you're doing it wrong. Yeah, I know that I ragged on this movie a lot, even though I do still support that overall it is a good movie and you should check it out if you're curious. And if you're on the fence about it, I'll also throw in that the Pixar short in front of this is probably one of my favorites. It's funny, emotional, physically and visually fascinating, but I think it's just that I still acknowledge that Pixar shouldn't have wasted their times on this. Again, you creators make amazing movies. You do what you need to do to keep the studio running, even if it's making a blatant cash grab every once in a while.
Fine, but even for a movie primarily made for merchandising, I don't think you intended this to be the least domestically successful Pixar movie, which I'm pretty sure came as a surprise to absolutely no one else.
I guess the saving grace is, at least this isn't the only Pixar film coming out this year.
You know, after we endure everything else this year has to throw at us.
Huh. You know, come to think of it, one of the things I usually use to defend the first Cars movie is that it came out in 2006, which was a really underwhelming film year, in general, but animation too. And then 2011, when Cars 2 came out, definitely was, except for the obvious. And then this year, yeesh, we need to stop making Cars movies just so they stop foreshadowing underwhelming film years.